Hi, everybody. Welcome. You have joined us for a craft writing panel for the class of 2K21. We are a group of middle grade and YA authors who have debuted or will be debuting in 2021 this year. So thank you for coming. Today we're going to talk about general writing life and the nexus between that and just our normal lives, because we do have those when we're not writing and promoting our books. So before we get stuck into the convo, we will go around and quickly introduce ourselves and our books. Megan, would you like to go first?
Sure. I am Megan E. Freeman, and I am the author of this book, Alone, which is a middle grade novel in verse that came out from Simon & Schuster Aladdin in January of 2021. And it tells the story of a middle grade girl who wakes up one morning and discovers that everyone in her entire town has been evacuated. She has been abandoned and left behind, and she is forced to figure out how to survive on her own. And it ends up being a very long task. She ends up being alone for a little bit more than 3 years before the story resolves. So it's an adventure survival novel in verse.
Wow, awesome.
That's really good.
Yeah, and scary 3 years.
Thank you, Melissa.
Kalena, how about you?
Yeah, hi, I am Kalena Miller. My debut YA novel, I don't have an arc with me, The Night When No One Had Sex, is coming out on September 7th. It is a YA comedy that is told all in one night from 4 points of view, as a group of high school friends decide that the night of their senior prom is the perfect night to lose their virginity. And as things so often happen in novels, everything immediately goes wrong. So it's a fun, sex positive, rompy sort of story.
Awesome. And things do always go wrong, don't they?
Always.
And I think, Kalena, I think you get the award for best title of 2021. Honestly.
Agreed.
I like my title. I'm fond of it. My agent was terrified to send the book out with this title, but I was like, no. We got to keep it. We got to keep it. And so she finally went with it, and it worked out.
Yeah, it's
awesome.
Great.
Great story. Melissa.
Yeah, I'm Melissa Hope, and I wrote Seed of Kings, which is a middle grade fantasy adventure about two brothers on a quest to rescue their family from pirates. And it's got monsters, mystery, and a little bit of magic. And it came out in April 2021.
Cool. Thank you, Melissa. And I love the ship in the back, fitting the theme.
Yes, we've got lots of shells and lots of ships in this house.
Love it. And I'm Gracie Kim, and I'm the author of The Last Fallen Star, which is also behind me, which is a Korean mythology inspired story about Korean American witches in Los Angeles. It's full of sister love, about families, about forbidden spells, and one adopted girl who is desperate to belong, and the terrible things that she gets herself caught up in that makes her discover who she truly is. It came out in May with Rick Riordan Presents Disney Hyperion. Cool. Okay, so that's us. Yay for us. Right, so the first question we want to talk about today is, so we have these books and we love writing, but how do we balance writing time with other obligations, i.e. life, sometimes other jobs? How do we do that? Who wants to start us off? I'm going to just pick someone. Kalena.
Sure.
Like to share your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the quintessential question for writers, especially when you're a writer who is balancing other jobs, other responsibilities, family, children. I know multiple people with children here. I have a dog who's really high maintenance, so kind of there. I think for me, it depends a lot on whether I have a deadline or a looming task that I am trying to accomplish. If that is the case, then I kind of reach those goals by having very, very scheduled time, and I kind of push everything that I can to the back. And I'm very lucky to have family around me who are willing to pick up the slack in some of those areas. When I'm less crunched for time, then that's when I find that I can kind of work a little bit more leisurely. And I think that's sometimes when some of the best writing happens, when it's sort of like, I feel like writing, I want to pick up my pen or open my computer, but obviously that isn't always the case. So I think for me, it's really a question of how can I best schedule time, and then forcing myself to stick to that schedule, which is its own struggle, obviously, as I am one to be easily distracted.
Absolutely. What about you two, Megan and Melissa? Any wise words?
I have a similar experience to Kalena. I'm fortunate in that I am an empty nester. So my husband and our children are grown and gone. So I'm no longer balancing the challenges of work and motherhood. So it feels very luxurious from that point of view. And I find that in my experience, it writing and comes in seasons. Like I'll give you an example. When I was trying really hard to get the first draft of one of my current works in progress finished, I set myself a weekly goal, a word count goal. Some of you may be familiar with NaNoWriMo, which is November, National Novel Writing Month in November. And the timing was bad for me for that. So I did JanoWriMo and I wrote in January. And I set goals with a friend who was also doing goal setting. And my goal was to write 40,000 words in the month of January. And because I backward designed it and I knew that I had to write a certain number of words every day, and if I didn't make that count, then I had to add them to the rest of that week. And we had accountability meetings and really clear outlines for our goals. That was really, really effective. But I don't do that all the time. And sometimes, like Kalena said, days may go by when I'm not writing at all and I'm working on other things, maybe related to writing, social media or conferences, presenting, things like that, but not actually producing. And so I'm not too hard on myself around that. I'm good with a deadline. I work well with a deadline, but if I don't have one, I put a lot of stock in the need to refill and keep full the creative cup, and that happens away from my desk, doing other things and engaged in other activities, including reading, including being outside in nature, that kind of thing. So for me, it really ebbs and flows depending on what my goals are. I will say that having an accountability partner, somebody who, and I do have one, she's another author in my agency. She and I have a weekly phone call, and we talk every week, and we share a spreadsheet where we set goals for ourselves for each week. That has made a huge difference. And knowing that somebody else is out there paying attention to whether or not I'm meeting my goals makes me more inclined to want to meet them. So it's a little psychological trick, and it makes it a little less lonely too. So that's been a good strategy for me.
Yeah, definitely. That accountability part is a really good trick. Melissa, how about you? You've got a little one.
Yeah, I don't even know if I'm qualified to talk about that. Gosh, yeah. So I've got 3 kids, and it feels like with every kid, I'm changing my approach to writing. With my first, I was really good about writing like every single day when he napped. And with my second, it was like most of the days I could do it. And now with my third, I'm like drowning a little bit. Like I'm like, what day is it? So I find that I just write whenever I think of it. So I'll write a lot actually on my phone. And it will just be like, I'll just be doing the dishes or playing with the kids or something. And then something will pop into my head because I'm always thinking about books, and I'll just quickly write it down. It might be like a paragraph, it might be a whole couple pages, or maybe it's just an idea. But once I have like a compilation of all those things, when I can sit down and write by myself, it's a lot easier to be creative, because it's like, oh, I already had this idea while I was in the shower, so now I can expand on it, and it's not just like staring at a blank paper and trying to figure out what to write about. So I'm not sure I've quite figured out or mastered any technique around the writing and scheduling my writing, but just striking when the iron is hot, I guess, is how I've been doing it lately, and it's working.
I think I'm in the same boat as you, Melissa. I don't think I figured it out. I think it's a daily struggle for me, and I just have one child, to figure out where my time comes from. And to be honest, I think I spent a lot of time complaining to myself in my head about the lack of time, because I wanted writing to be like any other day job where you've got, a solid amount of time during the day. I think where I've come to is that I don't have that. I can't have that. So what I am trying to do now is I guess sacrificing other things in my life if writing is going to be a priority that day. So for example, if I know I have a deadline and I need to get a certain amount of words or a certain amount of work done within a certain time frame, then that day, instead of spending that extra half hour or an hour sitting on the couch with my husband at the end of the day in front of the telly, I will start my work day after the kids gone to bed, So thinking, okay, so I can't have my day, but I can start my work night at 9 or 10. And I find that a more sustainable way to work, because I feel like I have a solid bit of time that's mine, because I've tried the bits and bobs method, and that just doesn't seem to work for my brain. So yeah, I guess we do just find ways of making it work, because we all suffer from the compulsion to share our stories.
Yeah.
Megan, yeah.
Go ahead, Gracie. Sorry.
No, Melissa, you go.
Well, just what you were saying is like, it brought up the idea that you have to realize what your time is like, and then don't get down on yourself. Because I used to think like, oh yeah, I wish I could write all day, or even just like 2 hours in the middle of the day when I'm like most functional. But that's not what I've got. And so I stopped getting down on myself for something that I couldn't control. And so I just tried to like take whatever time I do have and use it to the best that I can. So that's what I was thinking of when you said that.
Yeah.
I think too, there's something, my novel sold after my youngest daughter went off to college, and it was in the last semester of my last year working full-time as a teacher, as an educator. And there was a part of, so I was, I was 50 when I sold my debut novel. I had published a small collection of poetry a few years earlier, but my publishing life came very much after my parenting life, if we think of our lives as having seasons, right? And I will tell you that I don't regret for a second the time I spent parenting and the time I spent with my daughter reading books or going to sporting events or whatever those things were. And now that I'm in this second season, if you will, and I'm writing a lot of what I'm writing is about those times. And a lot of the stories that are coming to me are stories that are generated from the memories I have of the experiences that we shared. So I really think you're onto something when you talk about not beating yourself up or not making yourself wrong for not doing it, because the time you're spending is time you're not going to have again with your kids, right? Or doing whatever it is you're doing. And all of the life experiences that you're having are fodder, are content that you can draw on later in ways that you might not even be thinking about now. So they're giving each other grace, giving yourself grace, I think is really important to the creative process, right? Because you don't want to spend your creative energy beating yourself up.
Absolutely. And you mentioned it before, Megan, about I think you said creative well or creative bucket, to make sure that's full, because I think there is nothing worse for creativity than pressure to produce something without being anything there to draw on.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's a good question. Where does creative inspiration come from, and how do we handle the writer's block, whether you believe it exists or not? Do you guys have tips or tricks on how you do that, apart from obviously living life, giving ourselves license to enjoy our life and not just have to produce? Kalina, what about you?
Yeah, I will say that sometimes have the opposite approach, which is probably not the healthiest advice. So, feel free to ignore me. Probably should. I like to manipulate my mental illnesses into like forcing me to write, because otherwise I wouldn't. And so when I start to feel that like really crushing guilt that I haven't done anything, then I take that and I like amp it up to like a 7. And at some point, the cost benefit analysis really forces me to just like get over it and sit down and write. And I think for me, if I always waited until I felt inspired or if I felt creatively nourished, then I would always claim that I just needed to watch more YouTube videos. And so I think for me getting over blocks, obviously there's like that period of, a couple hours, a couple of days where I complain to everyone around me. And then when they're really starting to get annoyed with me, then I have to kind of take myself to a new setting or put myself in a different situation and sit down and tell myself, if you haven't written anything in 3 hours, you will feel really shitty. And then I usually end up writing. And I have found, I think sometimes there's this fallacy that like our writing is so much better when we're inspired, and our writing is so much stronger when everything around us is perfect. But sometimes I feel like we can really produce our best work when, I don't know what metaphor I'm looking for. Like there's something about needles or something. Petals, metaphor. When we're really on a deadline or forcing ourselves to produce and we're not giving ourselves any outs, like Megan was talking about with having accountability partners. Or sometimes I'll even like check myself into a hotel and be like, you are spending money. If you don't write, then you are wasting money. Right. And so you set up a scenario where you have to succeed or else you'll feel horrible. So don't take that advice. Probably it's not great for your brain, but sometimes that pressure can create impressive outcomes. I don't know.
Yeah, diamonds.
Right.
How about you two, Megan and Melissa?
Yeah, I totally agree. I sometimes write the most and the most productive when I've got like a deadline in that week, because I have to do it. There's like no other option. But also sometimes if I do have a little bit of time, like if there's not a deadline coming up right away, then if I have writer's block or I'm just stuck, then I read this book from Disney Imagineers. They're like the people behind Disney, basically. And they just said something that stuck out to me, was that when you have a problem, you can think about it and think about like what the problem is and then leave, do something else. Because while you are doing something else, your subconscious is actually working on the problem. And so they encourage their employees to do that, or like they did when they wrote this book. So I've done that a lot, and you have to actually consciously have the problem in your head first before you do the subconscious thing. So I might have a problem in my head thinking like, okay, I need my character to go from A to B. I don't know how to do it. And that's my problem. And then I'll just go vacuum, or I'll go do the dishes, or I'll go have a shower, or just something. And usually the idea will come, or some idea will come, and then I'll run off of that. And going on a walk too, that's a great one. Like, so just like letting your own subconscious kind of figure things out is a great way to handle writer's block if you've got time. And other times, just push through it. Just push through it, like Kalina was saying.
I like that. Get your brain to work when you're not actually thinking about it.
Yeah. Alana
That's
K.
fantastic.
Arnold talks about that. She talks about the back of your brain, that it's the back of your brain is working on something when the front of your brain is not paying attention to it. I had that experience. It's interesting that you shared that, Melissa, because I definitely have that experience, and I've been doing this long enough now that I have faith in the process. So I don't panic if I feel dry, or if I feel stuck, or if I feel uninspired, because I have I have faith that I will feel inspired again, and that creativity isn't something that you use up and then you never get back or anything like that. So that faith actually makes it easier to relax and trust whatever moment I happen to be in. But for me, the experience of having the subconscious solve it usually happens when I'm sleeping. So I'll be mulling over a problem actively in my awake day, and then it'll come to me, or I'll feel inspired, or some solution will present itself at, say, 3:30 in the morning. And it's such a great feeling. And I wake up with this, it's almost visceral, like, oh, like that it's happening. And sometimes it takes a few days for it to all kind of marinate and percolate, but it's a really cool feeling when it comes. And it's exactly what you described, Melissa. And I have a friend who keeps, she gets inspired in the shower. Hot water movement, who knows what it is. She keeps a grease pencil in her shower so she can write on the tile, because she does not trust herself to not remember whatever her inspiration was. And I thought that was brilliant. When Melissa, when you were talking about writing on your phone, the notes feature on my iPhone is one of my favorite things. And also the voice recording, because sometimes I want to speak it, and being able to speak it and then later go back and transcribe. All of those device applications have been really great for me. I used to carry around a tiny little notebook, and I don't do that anymore because I've got my phone. So all of those things I think are helpful.
Yeah, because like if you have been mulling over this problem and then you don't write it down when it comes, then it's useless. And that's why people get stuck, because they didn't, take advantage of that moment when in the shower or 3 a.m, they wrote it down.
I personally find, in a slightly different tack, that writer's block to me happens when I'm writing. It happens when I'm not planned enough. I know some people can just pants manuscripts, and I admire their brains. I think their brains must be wired in a whole different way to mine. But basically, I get lost if I don't know what the point of my scene is. I need that much detail. Like by the end of the scene, what is the thing that I'm trying to achieve? What's the cliffhanger that I'm trying to end the reader on? What is the advancement I want my main character to go towards? So for me, it's really over planning. I end up going with the flow when I write, and I find my plan always changes, but I need it anyway to get started. So for me, that's one really crucial way I avoid that writer's block. But for me, that writer's block also comes in between manuscripts, because for me, it's more that need to produce. I recently did this really interesting self-belief course with a friend who's getting her license to become a certified self-belief coach. Sorry, that's the word, coach. And she told me that having done these sessions with me, that I put so much of my self-worth on production, on the creation of production. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so true, because when I'm in between projects, even when I'm doing things like reading to fill my creative well, or watching things or promoting things on social media, I feel anxious because I'm not writing. And because somehow my brain says if I'm not writing towards a new piece of work, then I'm not working, or I'm not producing or being productive. And so that to me has been a real big game changer recently, to put that down and to say that creative inspiration needs to, like Megan said, percolate sometimes, and it just needs some time, and that it will come. It will come. It's not disappearing anywhere, but that there are ebbs and flows to work like this, and that we need to just trust that it will happen. But that sometimes you just have to sit down and do the work too. Sometimes you have to sit your butt in the chair and do the work, otherwise the words don't flow. So I think it's perhaps for me, it's knowing which of those two categories I'm in. Is it the category where I do actually just have to sit down and start the work, and that will eventually just start the flow? Or is it where I can take a step back and let myself rest and fill my well? So yeah.
That really resonates with me, Gracie. When I did the NaNoWriMo and tried to write 40,000 words in a month, in 4 weeks.
I love that, by the way.
Yeah, it was fun. I did not have a plot. I had a character and a setting, and I was very compelled by both the character and the setting, but everything I'd written previously had been very plot driven and very articulated in advance. And yet I had to create, I had to make this word count, and I found myself really, it's a very different experience to be pantsing in that way. And I found that I would just write scenes. Like I gave myself permission to not worry whether this was going to end up in the story, whether this had anything to do with my character's overarching goal. I wasn't even sure what his overarching goal was or should be. And I just wrote scenes, and I wrote scenes about different characters, and I wrote backstory, and I wrote just larks, like I just had them go do something. And it was very freeing in a lot of ways. And a lot of that ended up in the final draft. A lot of it didn't. but to I think it was Melissa's point about sometimes you don't know, you just write, you don't know what's going to happen. A lot of stuff surprised me, and it was really fun, and it felt creative and free, and I got into a flow that I hadn't necessarily experienced before when I was trying to stick to an articulated plot. So I bet you're right that it is different parts of the brain that are engaged when we're doing, working through different parameters and with different sort of paradigms. But it all results in words on the page, right? Which then we have something to work with.
Yeah. Those blasted words, they're so hard to get down on the page. Okay, so when we're looking at a new project, when we're getting started, how do you all brainstorm for that? Like, how do you get started? Is there a specific thing you do at the beginning of each manuscript, or is there not? Melissa, do you want to start us off?
Well, I have changed different with each book. I feel like I'm doing different things, but I did discover Save the Cat Writes a Novel, and that is like a book that, well, it's originally called Save the Cat, and it was written for screenwriting, but now they've created another one that's for novelists. And the outline in that book, I felt, has been the most helpful for me in creating a story that works. And so I've been using that to help plot and outline my books before I start writing. I do feel, like you said, I do get writer's block when I don't know what's going on in this scene. And so that book kind of helped me figure out the purpose of my scenes and the overarching arc, and just kind of like helping with that. So I always outline my books now, usually using that method.
Cool. Colleen,
Yeah, I also find that I have to be like really well outlined. That's generally the biggest roadblock to me actually getting started. I can brainstorm, I can produce ideas like a mile a minute for a million different projects at once, which is both a blessing and a curse, because my like biggest fear is getting 20,000 words into a book and realizing all you had was a 1-sentence pitch. This isn't a story. I can take cats and skateboards and be like, no, that's just 2 words. That's not a book. So I also, once I sort of have 5 stories worth of ideas in my brain, I really sit down with them and look at different plot structures, like Save the Cat being one of them, and kind of see, is something going to work here? Am I going to be able to craft a narrative that can sustain an entire story and that's worth sustaining an entire story? So generally the challenge is more kind of reining in that brainstorming process to see whether it's a project that is worth my time, because I hate wasting time. And I think in general, still half the projects I start don't go anywhere. It's inevitable, right? But I think for me, the plot is the biggest pre-writing thing that I have to do. The characters, the setting, like all of that is sort of there, it's percolating, but the plot is what I actually have to sit down and work on.
Megan, what about you?
Yeah, it's interesting. Of all of the manuscripts that I've completed, each one has been entirely different. And I'm not nearly as organized or structured as what Melissa and Kalena just described. For me, it's more about what idea has energy that's sort of like magnetic that's pulling me, that's compelling me. I keep, again, that in my notes app on my phone, I have a whole file of story ideas and book ideas. And sometimes it might just be some names of possible characters. Sometimes it might be a headline I see in the newspaper, or just a random idea that I have. And I capture them there because of course I'm not going to remember them. And then when I finish one project and I'm open to another one, I go to that and I sort of read through and see what tickles my fancy, or what seems to have some sort of, I don't know how to explain it other than just some energy. Like there's a charge there that's intriguing me or that's pulling me. And so I play with those, and I might write a scene or two and see what happens, or play with a voice for a character. It's a little woo-woo on some level, and then when I find the thing that feels like it has enough to pull me through, then I'll follow that and I'll go towards that. And at that point, I might get more organized. I might, the manuscript that I'm working on right now is a early middle grade novel in verse. And I went through and I articulated about 25 or 30 things that I want to happen to this character. Like she gets a kitten, she breaks a rule, all these different things. And I just made that list of things that I want to play with happening to her. Whether they'll end up in the story, I don't know, but I'm at least going to explore those things. So there is some organization at that point, but I didn't do that with my previous book. So I don't know if I don't know that there's one way that my brain will ever settle on, other than I want to go towards the story that is intriguing me, that I'm curious about.
How fascinating, huh? That there's you called it energy. I like to think of it as magic, stories demanding to be told by you at that point in time, which is not helpful when you are contracted to write a different story, but another one is calling out to you.
Right.
Yes. I have recently found that, like I said before, I love to plot and I need it to start writing when I'm starting a new project. But I've really realized about me that when plotting, I do the beginning to the inciting incident. So the thing that kicks off the story, the thing that would basically be the pitch, or would grab a reader or agent or editor's attention. But then I need to stop. I can't do from then on linear wise. I have to then stop and say, how does it end? I need to know exactly how it ends so I can engineer it backwards. So that's a new discovery for me about my process. But yeah, I think for me, I love the foreshadowing. I love the planting. I love twists and turns. And so I think in order to feel like I can do that effectively, I need to know end game and then work my way back. So I think that's how I do it. Okay, time-wise, we're almost at the end. So we'll end with a final question about how we tackle edits. So it's all good and well, we get the first draft down, which I personally find is the hardest, but how do we tackle edits? And I'll go first. For me, I love editing. I love it, love it, love it. I think the first drafting process is like drawing blood from stone. I am just sweating buckets over there trying to put that darn sand grain by grain into the sand pit. Like that's what I feel like I'm doing the whole time. Editing to me feels like I'm finally in the sand pit with the sand that I put in there, and I'm now allowed to play and build my castle. So for me, the revision process, I just love, and I can sit there for 12 hours without getting up to just edit. So for me, how do I tackle it? I just do it because I can't not do it. And I love getting feedback. I know some writers don't like so much feedback, but I love it because it tells me if there's a pattern, especially in the feedback that I'm getting, what I can do to polish my product even more. And I find that so invaluable. So for me, it's just, I love edits, full stop. How about you, Will?
I will go next because I am the complete opposite. I love drafting so much. We'll do that forever, very happily. Edits cause me so much stress. I think because I like the freedom of the drafting process and knowing in the back of my brain that it doesn't have to be perfect. And I can tell myself that over and over again. Now I'm getting to the point where I actually have to make it perfect. And so that's a lot of pressure that I put on myself, even if it's not necessarily there. So I handle it with a lot of rewarding myself for taking tiny steps, and list making. Another thing I really enjoy doing, because revising stresses me out, is that I enjoy opening a brand new document and working on what I need to work on in there, so I don't have 70,000 words of stuff that's like messing with my brain, and I can kind of tackle it as a new project. This paragraph in itself is its own entity, and that kind of gives me a little psychological workaround there. But in general, I tackle them with a lot of anxiety, and list making, and telling myself that I can do it, even when I feel like I absolutely cannot.
We love that feeling. I love that we're so polar opposites on that, but it just goes to show there's no one way of writing.
I wish I had that passion for revision. In my head, it would make everything in my life work so much better, and yet it's not there.
I wish I had your passion for first drafting. That would make my life so much less painful. And yet here we are. How about you, Megan?
I'm somewhere in between. I absolutely love working with collaborators. So I love getting feedback from my critique partners or my beta readers. I loved working with my editor on Alone. She absolutely made the book better, and I was so hungry for that insight and that perspective. And I also just enjoyed the back and forth. I enjoyed the teamwork. Writing is so solitary so much of the time that when I get that chance to interact creatively with somebody else on the project, it feels really, really good to me. Having said that, I do love drafting as well. I love the freedom that comes with drafting. The part that's hard for me in revision, it's not hard for me, but that sometimes feels a little daunting, is the scale of the project, right? Like thinking about, okay, I mean, this is a minor task, and it's not even that hard if you're word processing, but going through and pulling out all the extra words that we use in our speech, but that we don't want in our writing, the that's and the justs and the evens and all of those words. Just the thought of going through a 65,000 word manuscript and looking at every single word is daunting and kind of overwhelming, and I get fatigued from that kind of thing. But having said that, I've come across over the years some really great revision strategies that help focus that revision, that break it down into manageable tasks that then doesn't feel so completely overwhelming. But I do get bored with the work. I get sick of it. I get tired of it in that last stretch between it's almost polished enough to send to my critique partners, but not quite. And I've got to keep going through and asking this particular question, or going through and tracking this particular motif, or whatever it is that I'm focused on. So it does feel sloggy, but it's still gratifying, right? And once I get it into the hands of the other readers, then I'm loving it again. So somewhere in the middle.
We're in the middle. What about you, Melissa? Where do you sit on the spectrum?
I'm definitely like you, Gracie. I really enjoy editing. I feel like the first draft, even though I do enjoy a lot of the freeness of the first draft, it's also like pulling teeth. Like it's so hard. But then after, when you're editing, it's like, okay, I have something to work with. Now let me just, fix it here and whatever. So I like enjoy it. I don't usually have to force myself, but maybe towards the end, like Megan was saying, when it's just tedious little things, that can get annoying. But I really enjoy readers, beta readers, critique partners. They are so crucial for writing a book. And they can give you so many ideas, and they can point out pieces that you would not have realized were flawed. So I have a lot of people actually ask me questions about writing, and so many of them say, do you think I should let someone else read this first before I publish it? And I was like, that should not even be a question. Yes, you should be careful, pick wisely who you want to let read it, but yes, you should let people read it. And I think you can just grow so much, even from just like a tiny thing. So like I feel like most of the time editing is great. The only time when it's not is when like towards the end, or if someone says like, hey, this scene doesn't work for me and I really liked it, that can be like a little bit of a setback until I think, okay, what's really not working here? Because sometimes I realize they totally missed the point of the scene. And so my job now is, okay, how can I fix that instead of just like throwing out the whole scene? Like what really is the problem here? They didn't understand what was going on, or they lost what the setting was. And then I like the process of like, okay, how can I fix that, or where can I introduce it, or just tweaking it. I don't know. I'm like you, Gracie. I like that part. It's fun for me.
And I think that is a good way to conclude by saying community is kind of everything, really. That writing, the act of writing, can be a very solitary act, but really the people that help us to perfect our work and each other, like this group, for example, or our debut group, make the whole process so much more enjoyable and so much less lonely. And being able to debut with this group with you guys is so much fun. So I'm really grateful for you all. And for everybody else, thank you for watching this. And you can follow more about us at on our Twitter, on our Instagram, on our YouTube, and also our website, which you can all find at classof2kbooks.com, or class of 2K books as the handle. So thank you so much. And I hope that you will all enjoy our books.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.